And I'd done lots of research, pulled aside a lot of different photos, and I really decided to go with the ones that were the most powerful and left their mark on me, that told the story of the movement in the most impactful way. Um, and, then I decided, okay, well, what's going on now? Let's tell the story about some of these photographers that are still doing this type of work. And that led me to the last image of the Time magazine cover, because the story certainly is not over.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a good ending in terms of where we've been and where we're going.
Okay. Well, let's start looking at some of these. I know we have them all ready to go.
Excellent, excellent.
So,
I mean, there were just so many to choose
yes.
from,
Yes, I
so it
did
was
not envy
hard
your
to,
job.
very hard to narrow it down. Oh yes,
This
the, mm-hmm.
this one in particular is always the juxtaposition of what's on the billboard and the people standing in line is just priceless.
Very powerful, isn't it? And Margaret Burke White, who I admire greatly, especially as a female photographer, she wasn't afraid to just get right in there and tell her version of the story that she was seeing. And this was taken during the Great Depression. So there were a lot of people in the bread lines, and this was one of them. And she just happened upon this image that's just so powerful, because you see really both sides right in front of you. um,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Yeah,
the American
absolutely.
way being
Yeah,
perhaps a few different ways.
absolutely. And then, if I'm not mistaken, the next image takes us back even further.
Yes, Frederick Douglass.
Yeah, and the quote you use in his essay is so powerful, right? Because he was so cognizant that photos show others that he was, quote, worthy of freedom and citizenship and allowed others to, quote, see his humanity.
Yeah. And if I'm sure everybody probably knows this in your audience, but as an escaped slave himself, um, he really understood the power of imagery and how to get his point across, uh, just in terms of seeing him as a human being and not just as a Black man, or perhaps a negative stereotype that some might have heard about him. Um,
Yeah,
and he was a powerful orator as well. So his words, along with his imagery, really created a sense of taking back that power.
yeah, and these photos just convey such a dignity as well. And you mentioned he was one of the most photographed people in the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. Which I didn't know before I started this. And he, and the daguerreotype came out just a couple years before he escaped, and started speaking about his experience being an enslaved man. And he really latched on to the power of the camera and realized what a powerful tool this is going to be to help explain who I am, and thus who we are as a people.
yeah, yeah. And when you juxtapose these images with another one that you chose, which I think is the next one. Oh, nope, it's not the one I was thinking of. But this is also very powerful too, right? Because these are
Sure.
people at gunpoint who are, proclaiming, I am a man. What was the importance of photos during the civil rights era, at 1950s, 1960s?
Well, I mean, I think that the importance of getting the story out, when you read something, you take it in one way. When you see something, it really soaks in and becomes etched into your memory. Um, Taking control of the story, taking control of the narrator, of the narrative, and really allowing others to see Black America through a different lens, from a different perspective, giving a voice to the unheard, to the unseen, so people could really see for themselves what was happening and not just depend on word of mouth accounts, make up their own minds about what they thought was right and wrong, in terms of behavior And the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. It just rings true, especially with these images, giving us these stark reminders of the hate, the animosity. Also, on the other side, promoting understanding, promoting that change that is going to help us grow and really free ourselves as a society. And that, the civil rights of all human beings should be respected. And it's not just a one-sided idea here, that I am a man and a woman and a person. Very powerful Ernest Withers image here.
Yeah. And well, and even more so because during this era, particularly in the South, but not exclusively, right? African American men were referred to as boys and addressed as boys. Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
A way to keep them down, keep them in sort of a childlike state, not recognizing them as fully realized human beings, as men, grown men able to make their own decisions. Um, and that a lot of that stems from fear, just fear of what you don't know, and probably also fear of past behaviors. Because when you're treating people in such a way, it's got to be justified somehow.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. Let's take a look at the next one.
mm,
Okay.
there's our doll test. Oh, this one. Yes, yes.
You know, I did not know that this was titled what, the Scream photo?
The Scream image, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. This
very
one.
powerful. This is there are several different images taken at the same time. So this is a little different perspective on this one, but they all communicate the same idea of this woman, Elizabeth Eckford, a lone sole Black woman, surrounded, by this white mob, really hurling insults, um, very angry just about her very presence being there. And Hazel Bryan behind her just screaming at her, so angry. Her face is contorted. She just cannot get past this idea that they are going to allow people of color, black people, to integrate their school, and they didn't want it. And that day, that what was known as, this is Little Rock, Arkansas, the Little Rock Nine, they were actually turned away at the door, and it would be, I think, a month or so before they actually integrated the school.
Wow. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next one? I want to see more.
Yeah. Oh wow, this one.
Yeah.
This one was, it was hard to choose between these fire hose images. Charles Moore, and this was Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. Demonstrators, peaceful demonstrators, mind you. And I chose this one because a lot of them just show the victims getting assaulted by these fire hoses that had the power and the pressure to tear the skin off your body. But I chose this one because it shows the firemen, the people behind it, actually doing this deed, this behavior, and it just struck me as so powerful. And Moore was born in Alabama, and I love his quote: "Pictures can absolutely make a difference and have an impact on society." That's what photojournalism is, right? He's there, he's seeing it, he's telling the truth. It was real important for him to get up close and personal as well, to make the impact even stronger. So, and
Yeah.
it was really a turning point to see these.
And I'm so glad you chose this photo because exactly as you were saying, it's, why you chose it because it showed the firemen. I was thinking the exact same thing. I've seen photos of the fire hose, right? But it never occurred to me that it was firemen. You always think of the
Sure.
policemen, the dogs, and yes, the fire hose, but yeah,
Yeah,
it involved all sorts of public servants,
sure.
right?
Conscious choices, doing the deed, based on what they believed was right at the time. And when you're taught something, uh, it's hard to let it go.
You know,
Hard to.
one of the things you mentioned in your essay is that, you know, how photographers are exposing these atrocities, right? But also how it was and still is dangerous work for the
Mhm.
photographer. Can you talk a little bit
Sure.
about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing to me because it is scary. Even just going down to South Park to a sit-in, a protest is makes you really look around you and pay attention to your surroundings because they were putting themselves in situations and in areas of the country that didn't necessarily want these acts to be seen. Out of sight, out of mind. It meant that their behaviors would be exposed to the entire country and really to the entire world. Um, and in these areas, the people felt that perhaps these photographers were against them, that, maybe they weren't on their side, but they were just there doing their job as good photojournalists to tell the truth about a situation that's happening in our country. And Charles Moore, the photographer here, said they would get taunted, yelled at, cursed out, things thrown at them. He'd be followed in his car, and they would come up quickly behind him and hit his bumper, threatening him, trying to push him off the road. And they were really easy targets because they had their cameras. So
Hmm.
everybody knew that they were there to record and witness what was happening. But they were very brave and they didn't yield. The same as the subjects they were photographing, they didn't yield. And, they were appearing unafraid on the outside, determined to tell the stories because, there's no room for this type of behavior in a free society. And in just doing their jobs, they're helping to push that message along.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reminded also too that this is the early era of you know, television news, right? So we could also see this in video, but that's like this fleeting, you know, at most 1 to 2 minute story, whereas this photograph we can come back to again and and again, right? And it
Right.
really does speak that thousand words, like,
Because it's there, it's etched in history. We can always go back and look at it. And as they're doing their jobs, they actually ended up in a way being activists themselves,
yeah,
and doing this work whether they wanted to or not.
right, right. So tell us what's going on here in this juxtaposition.
What is going on here in this juxtaposition? I know this is a hard image to look at. And that's just exactly why I included it. I didn't know much about this. Um, it was taken, gosh, um, back in the early 1800s. I'm trying to find the date here. I'm not great at dates, um, but whipped Peter is what it call. It's what it's called, and we've got this image on the right by James Spider Martin from the Selma Voting Rights March um, that really calls back to this image taken 102 years earlier. This escaped slave who ended up at a Union Army camp, and during his medical examination, they found that he had these horrific scars from being whipped and beaten. Hence the name. It became known as Whipped Peter. And at that time, um, there weren't any TVs or magazines or anything, but they made cards of this image and passed them out and really gave people a one-on-one view of, okay, this might be the perception of slavery, but this is really the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And he went on to fight for the Union Army um, after he escaped. And then we fast forward to Spider Martin's image here in Alabama. And, I just thought it was so interesting how both their backs are showing and both their backs have these messages on them. And
Mm-hmm.
which Peters obviously shows us one part, but, in Alabama, they're frustrated, they're tired. And, talk about putting yourself in a dangerous situation. This man showed no fear by doing this. And having the rebel flag also on his back to show. And MLK told Spider Martin, if it wasn't for photographers like you, nobody would know what we were doing. We could march until we were blue in the face, but seeing is believing, right? You can read
Mm.
whatever you want, but when you see with your own eyes, you really see what the impact can be.
Yeah, and you talk a little bit about that in your big idea about how during this civil rights era, photos tell the truth about the lives of African Americans, right? So what myths or lies were being dispelled and what truths revealed?
I thought about that a lot. And it really goes back to a perception versus reality thing for me. Seeing whipped Peter here from the very beginnings, African descendants were thought of as really subhuman, as savages, treated like animals, being whipped, or even worse in some cases. Um, and so these ideas cause these really ugly stereotypes to be taught and really passed down, even in families from generation to generation. And what we're taught when we're young, it sticks with us. What our elders tell us, we respect. That's who we're supposed to look up to. So, uh, you know, it's greatly going to affect the way that we see other people and the way that we can see entire groups of people. Vilified, demonized, caricatures of themselves, really mocked in drawings, and whites and blackface making fun, like you said, calling them boys when they are men earlier, just ways to keep it down. um you know and imagery just has this power to shed light, to change behaviors, change perceptions, because my truth in all of this is we're all humans. We all want many of the same things in life: happiness, love, respect, encouragement, compassion, and empathy, and to really just be seen as dignified human beings, fully realized, with so much really to offer American culture. But it's a tough road, uphill battle.
Yeah. And I was just thinking too, this is the image of the whipped Peter image was the one that came to my head when I was contrasting it to the image of Frederick Douglass,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And even in this image we see here, he's also very dignified,
Yes,
right?
he
Even
is.
all those whippings did not beat him down,
That's
right?
right. Absolutely. Look at his face. He's really beautiful man. And when I was reading about this, they talked about why the photographer posed him the way that they did, and why this profile, and what do you notice first? And it was funny because I thought, what do you notice first? Well, I almost look at his face.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look down and you're like, oh my goodness, okay. And it's almost like he's displaying this for you with his hand, right? Of, this is me, but this isn't me, you know. Um, Really powerful.
Yeah. And I want to, starting to have some questions in, and I want to encourage people as you have questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A and we will get to them. Let's see the next image.
Oh yeah.
This is a great one. Tell us
It
about this
is.
one.
Well, immediately brought a smile to both of our faces,
Mhm.
right? And you had asked me what was my favorite of all of these. And when I really thought about it, this one had to be my favorite because it was the one that made me feel good
Mhm.
about a really pretty terrible, situation. And this is Bob Gommel. And he was really famous for photographing people of note. JFK, he photographed the Beatles. And so he went down. Ali was fighting against Sonny Liston in Miami, and he went down and he said he pushed his way in here. He was the only white man in the room, And he got really close and in a really interesting position. But look at that. There's one guy looking at him. There's always one that's going to look at you. But everyone is looking at these powerful figures, Muhammad Ali, who was this still known as Cassius Clay, and of course, Malcolm X, the great Malcolm X. And what I love about this is all of these Black men together, united,
Mm-hmm.
smiles on their faces, feeling good in the presence of two real role models, strong, powerful, fierce, intimidating men, polarizing figures. But here they've dropped their guard and they're feeling comfortable just being themselves for a
Yeah.
moment. And, underneath it all in the culture, there always seemed to be this sense of joy and ease that really could not be snuffed out, no matter what. So it fills you with hope. It's a success story, really, of not just surviving, but thriving, some
Mm-hmm.
goodness in a sad situation. And at the same time, this image is taken at a lunch counter, right? So the juxtaposition here of such a sign of struggle, just having lunch at the lunch counter at Woolworths or wherever they happen to be here, the resistance that they got for that. And here they all are huddled in a room or at a lunch counter, and then really thinking about the hindsight of these two men and their trajectories. Muhammad Ali would change his name this year. I think this might have been one of the last moments he was known as Cassius Clay. And Malcolm X would be tragically assassinated at the beginning of the following year. So he wouldn't even be with us that much longer. So, what a special moment to be able to capture this levity, you know,
Yeah,
because I'm sure,
absolutely.
especially Malcolm X, did not have much of that in his life.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I also like about the photo is the irony of a photographer taking a photo of somebody taking a photo, right?
Sure.
Those are always fun. But the other thing that
Yes.
struck me about this photo is that both men are known for being serious,
Yes.
right? And here,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, they're caught off guard.
They're caught off
They're
guard. They're just having fun.
yeah.
Especially, I mean, we've seen Ali and his stuff, but he was a very serious man as well, and really an activist for the cause. But seeing Malcolm X smile is rare and makes you happy. And Gordon Parks was actually a good friend of Malcolm X, and he was godfather to one of his daughters and taught
Hmm.
him about photography.
Wow, I had no
So
idea.
pretty cool. Great shot though. Great shot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see the next one.
Oh yeah.
So this one, and I told you that this is one of the most powerful photos for me in the whole, in your whole images that you chose
Mm-hmm.
because, it says America 1968, but then they cross
Mm-hmm.
it out, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not 1968, which
Mm-hmm.
you might expect
Mm-hmm.
given the image, but it's 2015. So
Mm-hmm.
what has and hasn't changed about civil rights photography in the last 50
Mm-hmm.
years?
Mm-hmm. Brilliant, Devin Allen, that he did them in black and white because it takes us right back, right? And you're right. The image on the left, the 2015, could be anytime, really, right? And I almost just put this one in, but I wanted the other one because it was 2020 and it was after George Floyd's murder. And the crazy thing is, we're still facing so many um, of these same issues today, which just floors me, in terms of poverty, education, unemployment, housing, equal voting rights, still struggling for some of these same issues. But, that old saying goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Some people have really just dug in and they just don't want to let go of these
Mhm.
old ideas, um, that began with Whipped Peter's era and continue on with people like Michael Brown, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, on and on and on. If you think that's just the tip of the iceberg, really, with questionable results in court, and really, where's the equal justice under the law? This is etched into the Supreme Court building, right?
Right.
Um, and so it seems like we aren't learning quite fast enough, in my opinion, right? My humble opinion. And we are, and the needle's moving, but it's sort of bouncing back and forth, sort of a one step forward, two steps back. And how do we get anywhere with
Yeah.
that? And, we have short memories. We tend to forget the hard lessons, and that makes us make the same mistakes. And to that, on the other side of it, something that really stuck out in my mind as I just worked on all of this is the rise of African American culture in the United States, once really frowned upon, right?
Mhm.
Now really being embraced and respected, revered almost. It's got such an important place in mainstream popular culture, I think. Not just here, but all over the world. Like contributing to when you think of styles and trends, language, music, fashion, the arts, literature. It's really fascinating to me to see that growth over the year and that acceptance. And attitudes are changing. People are slowly letting go of their old beliefs. There's more understanding between us, respect, acceptance, even though sometimes it seems maybe hard to come by. But all of this imagery, it just lets us hold a mirror up to ourselves, like Hazel Bryan with Elizabeth Eckford, the Scream image. She saw that image a few years later and went and apologized to Elizabeth Eckford because she could not believe that was her, that was
Mhm.
coming out of her, that was who she was, right? And they even
Mhm.
struck up a friendship years later when they were photographed again by the same photographer. And it wouldn't endure, but they tried. you know
Mhm.
and to me, this just keeps us working towards a better today. And the other example, Daryl Davis, a musician from Chicago. He toured with Chuck Berry, all 50 states. He was a piano player. And his mission was to befriend members of the Ku Klux Klan, take them out to dinner, lunch, a drink, have a conversation with them. And as these men, usually men, I think they were all men, got to know him, most of them never met a black man before, but they had conversations and they were like, wow, you play this music, we love this music. And they became friends, and in turn they handed over their KKK robes to Daryl Davis, and he's collected 200 robes. And that story sticks out to me, and that we can't understand each other. If that can happen, anything can happen, just with
Yeah.
understanding between us. Put the guard
Wow.
down, be
Yeah.
willing to talk.
Awesome. So I really appreciated you introducing us to these new photographers or recent photographers, and I want to look at some of your photos. But before we do that, I want to get to some questions because
Mm-hmm.
we have several coming in. So Amy asks, how do you think the rise of citizen journalists and social media, live streaming, along with the concurrent decline of photojournalism and just journalism in general, right? Fake news, as a valued method of conveying news impacts the efficacy of civil rights and other social justice movements?
Yeah, good question. Fake news, it's tough. I almost feel like it's almost harder today to get a reality across because there are so many different channels that we can go to for our news, for our information, and not all of them are giving you the whole story or even the correct story. However, um, we can be in more places at once. We have the technology to do that, even just with cell phones, which are amazing cameras, right? Especially if you're a photographer and it's already in your brain. Um, so more information can come out, but everyone's questioning the validity of this information. So I think it's tough to get a message across. And the more you look at a channel or a page that isn't necessarily giving you the whole picture, when you get those beliefs in your head, then when you see the other side, it's almost harder to believe it or understand it or even be willing to. So it's like, wow, we've come so far with technology. And like you said, the photojournalism is starting to slow down and it's up to citizen journalists. The more it's almost convoluted even more with just people's personal points of view. Because with these photojournalists, they had a duty to tell the truth. They could not just give their own viewpoint. That was the news then. And so it's gotten a little muddied over the years.
Yeah, and our next question is going to muddy it even further.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
as it relates to quote, seeing is believing, what are your thoughts on the dangers to images like these with the advancements of
Mm.
AI?
Oh my gosh.
Specifically, the impact of deep fakes will have on true photography.
I'm not an AI fan because of exactly what you're talking about, Charo, Kelly. Um, right. Seeing is believing. And if we see these, what did you call them? Deep fakes. People believe those things. And I think that it has a detrimental risk on all of the work that these brave photographers and activists, even braver activists, have done over so many years to really confusing, convoluting. I think it's very dangerous, and I'm really not for it. I'm a purist. I still teach a darkroom class, and AI has its place, absolutely. Um, but I'm worried about fakes and the way that that's seen in a culture that is already believing what they hear and see and taking it for face value, not checking facts, not digging in deeply. On Facebook, we get sent our ads that are going to talk to us, speak to us, and not perhaps the other side of whatever it is you're reading about or thinking about. So I think it's dangerous, in my
So
opinion.
this question kind of goes to the flip side of that. So throughout this presentation, we've talked about powerful photographs. As a photographer, when you consider an image's power, how does the photographer's techniques make a difference?
Mm-hmm.
And she says, I'm thinking about the I am a man in photograph in particular. Not only are the men wearing signs, but you can also see each man's shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And that felt like something that was a deliberate choice from the photographer. Can you talk about what you look for when you take photos or what you think they were thinking about?
Mm. Can we pull that image up? The I am a man, if possible. That's a great question. Um, how does the photographer's technique make a difference? I mean, perspective is everything. When I teach photography, I talk a lot about what are you trying to say and how most effectively can you say this. The shadow of a man is very interesting, uh, just in terms of being themselves and being this other version of themselves. The perspective of him getting a little bit higher up so that we see the tanks on the horizon there, but really we are concentrated on what's actually happening in this scene. Um, I don't know where he has perched himself to get this perspective, but it makes the image more powerful, I think, than even if he was at the same level as everybody else. I mean, you know, photographers have to, I think the closer you are, the more impactful it is because, especially with photos like this, you can see the looks on people's faces. You can feel the power of being that close to the bayonet, um, and this perspective of turning so that the bayonets almost look like they're going into these people. Um, I think it was deliberate, absolutely, where he was and how he saw this. And as far as for me, what I look for when I'm taking photos are the things that I feel like I'm seeing that might go unseen by just the
Mm.
casual onlooker. Um, and I'm also trying to see beauty in ugly situations as well.
That
And
is a great segue for looking at some of your photos.
I
So
love
as you,
that one man's face who didn't have a sign. He was sort of just looking at them with a sort of a smile on his face, you know. Um, and you know, photos, oh, they always make you feel something, right? This man, Lawrence Citizen, and this was 2020, so we were in the heart of the COVID-19 pandemic. You see, most everybody around is wearing a mask, which is also interesting to put into perspective of what was happening. This was the March for George Floyd at South Park. And it was almost like the mask is almost like him being gagged and not able to speak. So he has to hold up this sign, kind of like the I am a man images, and saying, you know, uh, saying that I am exhausted. This is exhausting. It's 2020. What are we doing as a nation? And sort of just the look on his face, you can just see his eyes, but he looks exhausted, you
yeah,
know. He looks
absolutely.
exhausted walking around dealing with these same ideas again. And then the other image that I chose from this series, um, this shot, right, of our clock tower, the heart of downtown, really. And this beautiful sunset, and this police officer with his binoculars just overseeing the scene, overseeing, right? Overseer.
Mm-hmm,
And it
mm-hmm,
harkened back to those days of slavery almost. But also, look, he's doing his job too. He's trying to protect everybody, we hope, right?
mm-hmm.
And checking it out and making sure nothing pops off, nothing goes wrong, you know. But it's so, to me, calm and peaceful. The clock tower almost reckons to a church in a
Mm-hmm,
way.
mm-hmm. Yep.
um, Sort of thinking about the sins that have been committed, the atrocities. And the officer is just standing up there doing his job, and it feels peaceful, right? And it's funny when I take pictures and when I tell my class, I'm always like, look up, look down, look around, what's happening around you, you know. And so this scene just really struck me um, as being a peaceful scene that could turn violent at any moment, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you never
Thank
know.
you. I think we have two more quick
Oh
photos from
yeah,
you, and
this is, you know, my fine art photography and what I like to do. I've visited Cuba a couple times, once in 2002 and again in 2017, where these are from. Um, and I really love Havana because of the rich culture that is there, the beautiful people that are there, the strength and the resilience of these people and what they have gone through. Um, and you know, you see these crumbling buildings, crumbling facades, and then these two guys. He's got his beret on with his star, the guy sitting down, and you know, they pose for me. I asked them if they would, and I always like to try to give something, like give the photo, but since it's Cuba and the United States, you can't email. So I actually paid them for this image because you're taking an image. I always feel like you're taking something from someone. And then this young woman's face on this mural next to them, kind of this juxtaposition between the old and the new Cuba, the old and the new Havana. And then in Havana itself, there's Havana Vieja and Havana Nuevo, which are old and new, right? And then this next one is the famous Malecon, their sea
mm-hmm.
wall, and these two young men walking. And this is actually from my cell phone, you know, from the hip. So they didn't quite see me taking it until the very end. The kid caught on in the back. Um, but it just spoke to their strength, and nothing's gonna stop us necessarily. You can't even cut us off from the world and stop the money coming in. That's not gonna stop us. Because, and it reminded me of this cultural uh identity, and this that they're giving, that they're sharing with the world, right? And I loved this shot because of that. It just showed this resilience that their entire culture showed me when I was there. So that's what I like to do. And again, finding beauty in perhaps some rough situations. Um, that's what I like to do.
Thank you. This has been great. I'm gonna turn it back over to Julie now. And I
Mhm.
really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Valerie. It's been a pleasure.
I can't believe the time went by so quickly. That was really incredible. Thank you both, Anne and Valerie, for your work on today's presentation. And
Julie, could I
yes,
say something real quick? I just see a
absolutely.
quick comment from Amy. She liked the simplicity of the signs and the Shakespearean tone of the I am a man, more sinned against than sinning. And that was a quote from Shakespeare's King Lear. So a really interesting insight. And it just goes to show how much images make you think.
That's right. That's right. And I just want to say a special thank you, Anne, for making sure that, as you said, these images are not out of sight. They're not out of mind. And the thing that they're portraying and getting us to think about, they're also those topics, those really important issues of racism and justice and equality and all of that, they cannot stay out of sight and out of mind. So thank you for bringing that to light for all of us. For those of you in the audience, you can bring Anne Dean to your community. She can come in person. She can also do a presentation by Zoom. We offer that through the Humanities Kansas Speakers Bureau, so you'll want to check that out on our website, humanitieskansas.org, and it is free to your organization if you're in state and meet a couple of other requirements. So check us out, and you can bring Anne. I know she enjoys traveling around the state as well. And I want to thank all of you who registered and who attended today or who watching at a little bit later time. We welcome you into the movement of ideas, and we're so glad that you're here as well. So the big idea, our monthly online program takes a summer hiatus. We'll be back in the fall. So to be sure that you don't miss out when we return, you'll want to be sure and sign up for our e-news, and you can do that online as well, or follow us on Facebook or Instagram. And with that, thanks everyone. Have a great summer. We'll see you soon.
Thank you all.